The site was declared a National Historic Site in 1992. The land had still belonged to the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And then the National Park Service did a land swap with them and got about 600 acres. It's about a square mile that was out. Now, most of these buildings are gone for a couple of reasons. During the war, the Federal War Relocation Authority leased the land from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, which had built it for the water for their aqueduct, which was a whole other story about this land. One of their agreements on leasing it was they would leave it as they found it. So all these buildings you see,
The film is 22 minutes long. It's called WWII Manzanar. It will show as a deep.
Then after that, a lot of these barracks, if you know what to look at up and down this valley, you'll see them as houses, and they've been, some of them, they cut them in half, turn them at right angles. I mean, I had a lady who's been here since 1953 take me around the other day and show me some of the houses and everything. You really don't see them unless you know how to look for it. So anyway, most of this is gone. The only thing that stayed was this auditorium, which was built by the attorneys in 1944. This is where they had their last high school graduation. And then as you drove onto the site, those two rock sentry posts that you saw, those also had been built by an attorney. Those still survive. And then, well, we don't really show, but the cemetery is out here, and there's an obelisk. You saw it in the movie. That was also built by the attorneys, and that survived. Other than that, everything was pretty much covered over. The ponds were filled in, buried, and it was just left wasteland. So when it became National Historic Site in '92, our archaeologists started excavating. He's excavated some of the pond gardens. We don't have water in them now, but they're really incredible. And as I look at it, I think about it that that's what survived. You know, that's what you see that these people did. So today, any questions first of all? Their resources, as in
water and
food. Water.
Yeah.
Clothes, as in their clothes.
Okay.
Food.
Okay. First of all, the food was provided by the government, and they also could do jobs here and earn money. The highest pay you would make was $19 a month, and the reason for that, well, keep in mind, this is a long time ago. You're just coming out of the Depression, right? And a bucket private in the Army at that time made $21 a month, so they wanted it to be less than the military pay. So, like the people, like the doctor in the hospital, which is this complex here, he made $19 a month. There were chefs in the mess hall, and we've got that out there. I think it's $16 a month, but it went down depending on the job. Now, these three buildings over there were camouflage net factories. So they had workers that were helping to make camouflage nets to use over in Europe and in the South Pacific. That was another part of contention between the different groups, because, I mean, can you imagine why? Why would some people be against that?
Yeah.
Making nets to camouflage military, fighting Japanese.
Yeah, exactly. And they're here being thought disloyal. That ended shortly after the riot that we'll be talking about out on the site. So, yes.
Where's the entrance where we entered?
Okay, you entered...
Oh no, that's not me.
This thing. Because I'm not sure that they show... Excuse me.
Oh, it looks like it's right
Well, if you don't enter... Yeah, that's
They came in over here.
there. It is.
Excuse me, this is the highway. So you came past here. Okay, right here. So here's the MP post, that first rock building, and this is where the military police, meaning Army people, were. This in here was a sentry post, and that was the internal police, and they were internees led by non-internee officers, what we would have called then white officers. It's not really terminology I'm comfortable with. This over here is where the administrative staff ended up living. That didn't exist right away. That woman that spoke in the film, Martha Schoaf, the woman that came here to teach, she lived in a regular barracks for the first several months. But the internees came to call that area Beverly Hills because they actually had foundations and plumbing. So each of these barracks, as we spoke about, they're 100 feet long, 25 feet wide. It was divided into 4 apartments, so 20 by 25 feet. Each one had 8 people, which is great if you're an 8-person family, right? If you're a 4-person family, you come in and you think, oh, I got space, and then they bring another 4-person family. And we're not going to go to those barracks right away because I want to get you to some of the other stuff, but we do have 2 that we've reconstructed, and they are... I don't know why I'm so shaky with this. I don't have hand eyes. This is block 14, and this is where we're developing our interpretive stuff. This mess hall is where we're going to eat lunch, and that That's completely got its signs and exhibits. It's fabulous. It's really nicely done. And then this barrack here, Barrack 1, looks the way it looked when it first came. Remember they talked about in the film how the sand came through and his head, you could see where his head had been? Well, there was the floorboards, you know, the wood would dry out, and so they got bigger and bigger cracks. The sidewalls, same thing. So they started off that way, but by the end of that first year, actually, and this is what we show in Barracks 8, they had linoleum on the floor and drywall. And people started getting, like you saw in the movie, the woman putting up curtains and everything. People brought in furniture. They made it much, much more comfortable. But
where did they get that from?
one of the things was that the beginning of it, it was very tight security, right? Everybody was kind of in war hysteria. But things relaxed by the time the Battle of Midway happened because, okay, the war is turning, we're not feeling so scared. So people could send for articles they had put in storage, or they did a lot of mail ordering, you know, Sears Roebuck, things like that. One woman sent away for her sewing machine and started sewing curtains and stuff. And we do have more exhibits. A root cellar underneath to keep their vegetables and stuff. They didn't have air conditioning or anything, and it gets pretty hot out here in the summer. Okay? So this was all covered in sand by the time this became a national park, and our archaeologists excavated that. They set these up again where they, you know, if they tumbled away. They also excavated this pond garden that the Japanese internees had done. And they're all the ponds in this camp kind of follow the same idea. They start from the north. They're kind of piled high. You'll see a pipe there, and that represents like the mountains. And then it flows down toward the seas, the kind of the concept of it. Some of them had bridges, some of them had little koi tunnels that the koi could go through. They all had plants around them and trees. They were gorgeous. They did have water here. That was part of the deal. They got water from LA. Well, from the LA Department of Land and Water. So they were all built like that. And let me talk sociology again. Are you excited? The rocks that you see here that are kind of reddish, different colors, are different from most of the gardens because they got them from over there in the Inyos.
That's what I was going to ask you. They're red over there.
Yeah.
I'll actually take
Most
a
of them you'll see are granite from the Sierras. And for those of you who have any familiarity with the Sierras, the big peak you're seeing is Mount Williamson. It's the second highest peak in the contiguous states. It's about 100 feet shorter than Mount Whitney, which you would have seen out of Lone Pine. Okay? So this was their view. Kind of got some panel designs on some of these. Okay. So we talked about in the film the different ways that people reacted or handled internment, right?
Yeah.
The person who started doing the gardens, and it's a hard one to get to, so I'm not going to try to manage it today, but it is in the middle of the site. It's in Block 22. The guy who started that was named Harry Ueno, and he was the head of a kitchen mess hall. And he noticed that every day they're all lining up in these lines to wait for lunch, breakfast, dinner, and it's hot and it's boring. So they got the idea to start building ponds, which was in their culture mostly being from LA. Most of the people that were here, 90% of them came from LA.
Wow.
Yeah. Some of them came from Bainbridge Island in Washington State. And then there's one more spot, Stockton, I think. Okay. So he got the idea, so he started it. So Garden 22 was his idea, he started it, and everybody else jumped on it pretty quickly. The other thing about Harry Ueno, though, was he was the person who sparked that riot that they talked about in the film. And the reason was, again, we're talking about different ways people react, right? Harry was suspicious of the people who got along with the administration. And this came from before the war. This came from before dealing with this. Already in the Japanese-American community, you had people who were more wanting to assimilate and become more Americanized. And then you had people who wanted to hold their ties to their culture. So the people that wanted to assimilate more formed the Japanese-American Citizens League. And they were working with, chambers of commerce and everything. They were working with everybody. So when they came here, they formed the Manzanar Work Corps. Let me make sure I got that right. There's so many of these acronyms. Well, Harry Ueno was suspicious of that. And the main guy in the Manzanar Work Corps, which was sanctioned by the administration here, right? So Fred Tayama was the main guy there. Harry Ueno started the Kitchen Workers Union, which is more of a, well, it was not sanctioned. And one of the things Harry was upset about was he believed that the administration of the camp was stealing sugar and meat and stuff.